Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to inspire and motivate people to never give up on themselves or their dreams. We will chat with highly successful people from all walks of life and discuss what motivates and drives them to successfully attack life head on and never give up. Welcome to episode number 52 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is perspective. Our quote of the day comes to us from Dr. Wayne Dyer. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. It is my pleasure to bring you today's episode. I was introduced to our guest from a past No Quit Living guest, and it is always neat when things like this come full circle. Our guest today has a very unique yet simple way that he looks at things and approaches life. It is my pleasure to introduce Brad Rex. Brad, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Well, thank you, Chris. It's great being with you here today.
I appreciate it. So the first question we ask everybody is, are you ready to make it happen today?
Absolutely. Ready to make it happen.
Good stuff. So the number one objective of our podcast is to both motivate and inspire our listeners to never give up. I was curious, Brad, if you could share either a story about perseverance or perhaps a challenging time that tested you, but you kept on going and never quit.
Sure, Chris. Well, I've written a book actually called The Surpassing Life, 52 Practical Ways to Achieve Personal Excellence. And in that, there's a chapter called Blessing or Curse. And it talks about a parable, an old Chinese parable about the old man and his horse. And when you read that parable, the things that looked at first like they might be a blessing end up being a curse, and things that end up being a curse that look like a curse end up being a blessing. And so it's very interesting. He has a phrase in there, and he said, whether it be a curse or a blessing, I can't say. All we can see is a fragment. Who can say what will come next? And I've seen that certainly in my life. I'll give you a specific example. I had the opportunity to go and join a new company, or join a company in a significant leadership role. And it was a great fit for me, huge opportunity, significant impact in terms of my level and my compensation, everything else. So I went and joined that company. About a month or so after I joined, there was an announcement that the company was going to be bought out. And I said, wow, this is great for me because I had stock options. And in the event of the company being bought out, all those stock options would vest, and financially it'd be a great thing for me and everything else. And so I thought, this is fantastic, and so continued to work there. Well, about a year and a half later, I got laid off. And the reason I got laid off is the company that acquired it had paid way too much money for the company. And so they had to cut costs, and so they got rid of a whole level of management, and I was in that category. So you say, well, you have, looks like a great blessing, and then wait a minute, a curse. And when I got laid off, when I went in to talk to my boss and he told me, it was very obvious he was very nervous about telling me and very concerned about how I would react. And I said, you know what? I think this is going to end up being a great blessing. And I don't know how or why, but I believe that things are going to work out very well. Well, after I got laid off, I actually had time to spend with my kids. And my son at the time was a senior in high school. My daughters were just kind of starting high school. And I hadn't realized the impact over the 20 years prior of my being gone all the time. I've actually had 20 different jobs in 12 different industries in 30 years. And it's been a very busy, hectic time, a lot of time away. And that time that I had at home after getting laid off was just a fantastic time with my children. And we all look back as a family now and say that was very formative for them. And it was a wonderful time for me. And so it all gets down to how do you approach these things. And once again, you can get discouraged or think about it negatively, or you can say, you know what, this may open up great new opportunities that I never knew would have happened before, or a great time for my family or other things in my life. So I would just encourage your listeners, when something that appears to be negative happens to you, to go into it with an open mind and understand you're only seeing a fragment at the moment, and there may be a much bigger picture here.
I really appreciate you sharing that. And that's such an interesting perspective. And I think it comes back to one of the things we talk about quite often with No Quit Living is every opportunity, every situation, every time you wake up every day, you have an opportunity to make it either a positive or make it a negative. And obviously you took being laid off and you turned it into a positive thing for your family. And I think that's just a great story, because so many times in life you get hit with an obstacle or a curveball, and it's tough to always make a positive out of it, or it's tough to always look at it on the bright side. But I think you share probably a very similar theme is people working hard for their family, out traveling for work, and it's tough to be able to be there with your family and working hard. So I just want to commend you for not only taking it and turning it into such a positive, but also then turning it into a positive opportunity and experience for your family.
Well, thank you, Chris. And it's interesting because I talk about our children, and another very challenging situation that my wife and I went through was infertility. We, for 10 years, were not able to have kids, and we didn't know if we would be able to have kids. And once again, it was a very challenging, trying time for us. But ultimately, we did, and we had our son. And then I like to say God's sense of humor, we had twins. After that, we had twin daughters. So and yet now today we're very open about that. And we've had a number of people who have, when we've shared that story, have said, you know what, we're going through that right now. And I think one reason we go through hard times is so that we can help other people when they go through a similar situation. And once again, that's why I'm so encouraged by what you're doing. Hopefully it gives encouragement and motivation to people who are going through, maybe somebody who just got laid off and is hearing this right now.
No, I'm glad you shared that point, because that is the number one objective of our podcast, is trying to connect with at least one or two or three listeners to every single show that might be going through something similar or possibly about to go through it. And I always tell people in life, you don't always want to recreate the wheel. So look for mentors or look for people that can help you. And obviously there's nothing that's going to be 100% identical, but getting laid off is something that happens more often than not. And why not speak to somebody or listen to somebody that has been through it, so you can go through with their perspective and maybe not bang your head against the wall 20 times, maybe only do it 3 or 4 times.
Absolutely.
So one of the questions we always encounter, one of the things we talk about is the concept of mentors. And I was curious if you could touch for a minute your thought about mentors. Have you been mentored by people, or have you been a mentor for others in your career?
Actually, yes to both. I've had some very incredible mentors. Usually the person who I've been working for directly has been my mentor, although I've had others who have not been, who've been indirect mentors. But I think it's very important to have somebody who's ahead of you, who is has gone down the path, and whether it be in terms of the work environment or your family environment. We had a mentor. My wife and I had a couple that mentored us, and their kids were older than our kids. And so they were able to say, here's what you're going to go through in the teenage years, and here's things to think about. And oftentimes we make friends with people in our same age group, but it's good to have people ahead of you. And then we've mentored couples, that are younger than we had been. And once again, we kind of feel like that's almost an obligation to help people and to not, you don't have to go through life alone. And there's so much wisdom out there, and so many people who can say, oh, yeah, I faced that with our child, and guess what? They're going to be just fine, and you don't need to worry about it. So yes, I believe very strongly that mentors can be very important. And in the work environment, oftentimes, if your mentor leaves to go take another job somewhere else, they may take you with them, which can be a very positive thing as well. But if you really think about it, we spend more waking hours at work than anything else in our lives. And so having great relationships with people at work is just so important. And looking forward to going to work and being excited about it, and having people who can encourage and motivate you and guide you is critically important.
No, I could not agree more. And I think mentors, whether you look at them professionally or personally, I think they're just a great opportunity. And I would recommend our listeners is just to keep your eyes and ears open, not only for an opportunity to be mentored by somebody, but also might be an opportunity for you to mentor somebody else. And I find personally, in the mentee and mentor relationship, when I've mentored other individuals, I myself have gotten so much out of it as well. So I think it's just a great opportunity to not only help yourself indirectly, but also help others as well. So here's a question for you, Brad. If you could go back and give the 20-year-old version of yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, I would certainly say, be open to new opportunities. Don't settle. Don't settle for an unsatisfactory work environment. There's lots of things you can do out there. Take chances, take risks. Many people will tell you that, and just enjoy enjoy the fullness of life. I mean, life is amazing. One of the things that I really seek in life is freedom. And I look at that on multiple levels: physical freedom, financial freedom, emotional freedom, spiritual freedom. And so I would tell my 20-year-old self, seek freedom in each of those aspects of your life and take direct measures, on almost a daily basis, if not weekly and monthly, to achieve that in each of those realms.
That is good advice. One of the things we talk about often is personal development, and a lot of our listeners are interested in increasing and improving different areas of their lives. With that in mind, I was curious if you have either a favorite book or perhaps you've read something recently that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
Well, people ask me frequently and say, what's the best leadership book out there? What's the best self-help book? And my answer is always the same. It's the Bible. And whether you're a spiritual person or not, the stories in the Bible are just incredible. And if you want to talk about perseverance and no quit living, you look at the characters in the Bible who went through tremendous hardships and tremendous ups and downs in their lives and still succeeded and did well. I mean, you look at somebody like a Joseph, you look at David, you look at Moses, obviously Jesus, Paul, the women of the Bible, Deborah, Esther. Those are incredibly powerful stories, and they aren't all happy endings and everybody making great choices. It's real life living, and with the consequences of making bad choices and the consequences of making good choices. So that's very motivating to me. I try to read the Bible daily, and certainly also read commentaries and other things that are helpful in understanding that. But if there's one book, that's the one that I would really recommend people focus on.
No, I can't go wrong with that. So here's a different spin. If you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Well, I'll give you, what many people would say, and certainly that would be Jesus, which I think would just be incredible, and because of the wisdom and the knowledge and everything that he offers would be amazing. So that would be definitely my first choice.
Followed by me being your second?
Oh, of course. All
right, good. So I wanted to ask you if there's anything exciting you're working on that you'd like to share with our listeners.
Sure. My newest company is called eHome Counseling Management Partners. We actually have 6 subsidiary companies underneath that target different markets. But what we're doing is reinventing or revolutionizing the mental health counseling business. If you look at that business, it really hasn't changed since the days of Freud. And you make an appointment with a counselor, you go in, you meet the counselor's office, wait in the waiting room, drive there, drive back. what we've done is to take that whole process and put it online. And so you actually meet with your counselor by video or by scheduled texting sessions. So it's much more convenient. It's much more anonymous, confidential. You don't have to worry about anybody seeing you in the waiting room. You don't have to worry about traveling there. And so it makes counseling much more accessible. And on top of that, we've added metrics to the equation. So we actually give you assessments when you come into our program. It's typically like a 3-month program. And so you do assessments in the beginning, the middle, and the end. And we believe this is a whole different approach for PTSD, for addiction treatment. We have a strong aftercare program for addiction treatment centers. Counseling, we have a couples program called eHome Couples. And so it's just a great opportunity to serve a lot of people. There's a huge need today, and particularly with this opioid epidemic that's happening across our country. And so we're trying to make a difference in that and help people and make it much more convenient for them.
You know, it's interesting. I do not know a lot about that field as far as statistics and everything, but one thing I do know is that the spin that you're taking on it via text and those type of things, I think really is allowing a different market, and especially with millennials, to connect with you. So I want to just commend you on that aspect. And I think that's one thing that successful companies do, is I think they adapt to the times, not where you're adapting and changing your business model as far as what you do and the actual ins and outs and the X's and O's, but the way that you connect with different people differently, I think really says a lot about what you're doing in that space. And that's just, it's remarkable that you're willing to do that, because I think a lot of companies, unfortunately, aren't willing to tweak and change with the times. And I think what you're doing is incredible.
Well, we've had a huge response to it, and it's just been, I mean, there's so many different markets we can go into, so many different people who are interested in it, and so that tells me that there's a need out there that we're filling, and hopefully going to be very successful in doing that. But the key thing is, helping people. And at the end of the day, if what you do in work can help people, then that is hopefully going to be successful, and at least you're going to feel very good about going to work every day.
No, that is awesome. And I know that a lot of people, unfortunately, don't enjoy going to work every day. So obviously you mentioned something that's very important to us at No Quit Living, which is helping others. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. So I wanted to ask you if you have any parting words for our listeners.
Well, the old Winston Churchill thing, don't quit. And as I said at the beginning, when you enter into a difficult circumstance, there's a reason for it. And to go through that, continue to persevere, and when you look back later, you'll understand it a whole lot better. I've had friends who have gone through, for example, cancer, and at first it's a devastating diagnosis, and then later on they say, wow, I enjoy life so much more now than I did before and appreciate it. And so whereas I would never want to go through it again, what I've learned from it has given me great depth and maturity. So, just face trials with that in mind. Look for the bigger picture. Look for what's God trying to teach me in all this, and persevere and come through on the other side, and you'll be glad you did.
No, I think that is such great advice, and I think whether it's something that you encountered, like being laid off, or just a small daily interaction, whether it's with your spouse or a business partner or a friend, is take into perspective that you can always make a positive out of it, and it's how a lot of times how you approach something. It might not be simple or easy, but by taking a 1-degree change and making sure that you attack it in a positive fashion, I think at the end it's always going to be better than it was when you were first looking at it. And last question, Brad, and I promise it's the easiest one. What's the best way for our listeners to either connect or follow you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, and again, it's Brad Rex. Very simple, and so I would encourage you to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I post on there, particularly about some of the new business things that we're doing. Also, I have, as I mentioned, a book, The Surpassing Life, and that's available at thesurpassinglife.com. Encourage you to take a look at that, and we actually have archives in there of different emails that I've sent out and blog postings. So would encourage your readers to look at that as well.
Well, listen, Brad, I cannot thank you enough for not only your positive approach on the way you encounter things in life, but you spending some time with us. And I really believe that our listeners will truly enjoy today's episode. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's been a pleasure being with you today.
To sum up today's episode and our theme of the day, perspective, Brad truly delivered some great value. When an exciting new business opportunity was presented to him, he was very interested and went all in. Unfortunately, the company got bought out a year and a half later, and he was laid off. Brad was very clear that although this wasn't what he wanted or had planned for, his approach was to make the most out of it. He was very adamant that he truly believes that how you look at things can make all the difference in life. And it so happened that this time off was just what he needed, as he was able to spend some quality time with his family at home. Brad also discussed how mentors have had a significant positive impact throughout his personal and business career. In his parting words, Brad discussed that when something negative hits, you need to change your perspective and how you think. He mentioned the importance of being open to new opportunities, taking risks, and not settling. The call to action today is to make sure that whatever life hands you, you make the most out of it. We can't control everything that happens to us, but we can control our perspective and how we look at things. I challenge our listeners that when you encounter your next obstacle, attack it head on and with an open mind as you go for your greatness. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.